Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Muslim Playlist.
All right, so we're diving deep into the world of Malcolm X and using his autobiography as our guide.
Yeah.
You're looking for a clear understanding of his life, and we're going to try to give you just that.
It's a really powerful journey. It reflects the tumultuous social landscape of America in the 20th century.
Yeah, we're going to move chronologically through it and focus on those key moments that shaped his views on race, identity, and social justice.
Yeah.
Get ready for a story that starts with a childhood marked by both tragedy and incredible resilience.
Yeah, his father was a passionate activist, heavily influenced by Marcus Garvey. He really instilled in Malcolm X early on those ideals of Black empowerment and self-reliance. But then his father was murdered by white supremacists when Malcolm was just a young boy. It just shattered their world.
It's heartbreaking to read about the family struggle with poverty and racism in Lansing, Michigan. He even recounts hunting and selling rabbits to white neighbors.
Wow.
Just a small glimpse into the deeply ingrained racial dynamics of the time.
Even as a child, he was navigating a world where his worth was constantly questioned. And then comes the disintegration of his family. Malcolm initially misunderstands his mother's refusal of charity.
Right.
But he later realizes that she was fiercely protecting their pride in the face of adversity.
Exactly. Sending him off with a state welfare worker. Her parting words were, "Don't let them feed him any pig."
Oh, wow.
It's a testament to her strength and commitment to their beliefs, even in the most challenging circumstances.
Yeah, it speaks volumes about the values she instilled in him.
Absolute.
And as Malcolm grows older, his awareness of racial injustice intensifies.
Yeah.
Living with the Gohanneses, a white family, he makes these keen observations about the differences in culture and food.
Right.
But what really resonates is his insightful observation about this inherent belief in Black inferiority that was ingrained in white society,
Right.
often masked by a veneer of condescension.
He really saw through the facade of politeness and recognized that underlying prejudice. School becomes another battleground where this racism manifests. He describes feeling isolated, particularly at dances, separated by this invisible wall from his white classmates.
Even his interactions with white girls who are initially drawn to him ultimately reveal those constraints of societal norms and expectations.
It's a constant reminder of the limitations imposed on him solely because of his race.
Yeah, and then there's that crushing moment when his ambition to become a lawyer is just dismissed by his white teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Dreams dashed because of ingrained racism.
It's such a stark example of how systemic racism can operate even within institutions that are meant to nurture potential.
Yeah,
These experiences fueled a sense of disillusionment and set him on a new course.
totally.
He ends up in Boston,
Yeah.
and that's where his journey takes a turn toward the world of hustling.
It's Shorty, a fellow Black man, who introduces him to this life.
Okay.
And he learns the code of the streets and survival tactics. He starts with gambling, dreaming of using winnings to support his musical ambitions, but soon he delves deeper into that world of hustling.
He describes buying his first zoot suit and finally feeling a sense of belonging in that vibrant Harlem nightlife. It's a stark contrast to the stifling environments that he experienced earlier. But even within this world, he encounters the complexities of race.
His relationship with Sophia, a white woman from Beacon Hill,
Yeah.
highlights those societal pressures and contradictions surrounding interracial relationships at that time.
It's a reminder that even in seemingly liberated spaces, societal forces still held sway.
Totally.
And as he becomes more enmeshed in the Harlem underworld, his anger toward white society escalates. There's that story about him working as a sandwich man on the train, where he uses his wit to humiliate a racist soldier.
It's a display of his sharp mind and growing resentment.
This awareness of racial injustice is heightened by his observations of the historical displacement of Black communities in New York City. He contrasts this with the immigrant experience, noting the stark differences in opportunities and social mobility.
He begins to see these systemic patterns of marginalization that Black communities faced.
And his involvement in drug dealing, particularly marijuana, underscores his reliance on street connections for survival and protection.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous path, one that ultimately leads to a turning point in his life.
His arrest for robbery and the subsequent 10-year prison sentence mark the beginning of a profound transformation.
It might seem like a setback, but his imprisonment becomes a catalyst for this spiritual awakening.
It's his brother Reginald who introduces him to the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam.
This is a pivotal moment. He goes from initial skepticism to being captivated by their ideology.
Absolutely. The Nation of Islam's emphasis on Black empowerment, self-reliance, and the critique of white supremacy really resonated deeply with Malcolm's experiences.
And this is where things get really interesting. He discovers the transformative power of reading and education while in prison.
Yeah.
He devours books, immersing himself in history, philosophy, and religion.
This thirst for knowledge ignites a desire for mental liberation that would fuel his future activism.
Right.
And then his captivating account of a mystical experience while praying in his cell further solidifies his spiritual journey.
It's almost as if prison, a place designed to confine, became the incubator for his intellectual and spiritual awakening.
Upon release, he fully embraces the Nation of Islam, dedicating himself to the movement. He faces resistance while recruiting new members in Detroit, as some Black communities view the Nation of Islam's teachings as too radical.
But that doesn't deter him. He leads caravans of converts to Chicago to hear Elijah Muhammad speak, earning recognition for his dedication.
His commitment is deeply admired by the Nation of Islam's leadership.
Yeah, his early speeches, with their fiery rhetoric about the white man's guilt and the Black man's need for self-knowledge, quickly establish him as a powerful orator. He doesn't just talk the talk, though. He actively works to help those battling addiction, like in the story of Cadillac Drake, a former pimp who tragically loses his fight with heroin.
It demonstrates that Malcolm's dedication to Black empowerment went beyond words.
Yeah.
He was addressing the real struggles within his community.
But even as his influence within the Nation of Islam grows, seeds of disillusionment begin to take root.
His frustration with the media's portrayal of the Nation of Islam as hate teachers grows.
Yeah.
He's constantly clarifying their message of Black self-reliance.
He also expresses skepticism towards both liberal and conservative politics.
Yeah.
Arguing that neither offers true liberation for Black people.
This is where his sharp intellect and independent thinking truly emerge.
Right.
He starts to formulate his own ideas about Black nationalism, emphasizing the need for Black unity as a prerequisite for genuine racial solidarity.
He astutely observes that Black men in America need to be reminded of their manhood, contrasting this with the inherent sense of power often attributed to white men.
It's a powerful statement about the psychological impact of racism and the need to reclaim a sense of self-worth.
This all culminates in a pivotal decision, his break from the Nation of Islam.
This takes immense courage, walking away from such a powerful and influential organization.
Absolutely.
But his disillusionment with Elijah Muhammad, particularly concerning moral inconsistencies and financial irregularities within the organization, solidifies his resolve.
His departure marks the beginning of a new chapter 1. Filled with even greater challenges and profound transformations.
Totally.
His break with the Nation of Islam is a huge turning point. It's so fascinating that he doesn't just leave. He establishes his own organization, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, or the OAAU.
A testament to his commitment to Black empowerment. Even as he parts ways with this organization that had been so instrumental in his own development, the OAAU aimed to create a broader platform for Black activism, encompassing a wider range of perspectives and strategies.
And it's during this time that he embarks on this transformative pilgrimage to Mecca. Can you tell us more about what happens during this journey and how it impacts his worldview?
His experience in Mecca is a profound revelation. He sees firsthand the true meaning of Islamic brotherhood and racial equality. It's such a contrast to the segregated world he knew in America.
Right.
He sees people of all races and nationalities worshiping together, united by their faith. This experience really just shatters his preconceived notions about white people and opens his eyes to the possibility of genuine human connection across racial divides.
There's that powerful anecdote about being invited into the cockpit of a plane flown by Black pilots.
Yeah.
A moment of pure joy and realization. It seems to symbolize the possibilities that exist when artificial barriers like racism are dismantled.
Exactly. It's a glimpse of a world where race is no longer the defining factor in one's opportunities or treatment.
Right.
This experience in Mecca leads to a significant shift in his worldview. He acknowledges the possibility of good white people and refocuses his fight against the system of racism, not against all white people.
It's a nuanced and complex perspective, one that challenges simplistic notions of good and evil and forces us to confront the systemic nature of racism. So even after his pilgrimage, he doesn't shy away from critiquing the hypocrisy he sees in American society. He becomes increasingly vocal about the limitations of the civil rights movement, particularly its focus on integration.
He saw integration as a way of asking for acceptance into a system that was inherently oppressive, rather than challenging the system itself. He believed that true liberation for Black people required a more radical approach, one that emphasized self-determination and economic independence.
And he was critical of both the Democrats and Republicans, seeing them as two sides of the same coin when it came to the issue of race.
Yeah.
He even compared Lyndon B. Johnson and Barry Goldwater, the presidential candidates in 1964, to a fox and a wolf, both intent on devouring their prey.
It's a powerful metaphor for the limited choices presented to Black voters within the existing political system.
Right. He rejected the notion that voting alone could bring about true equality. He really pushed people to think beyond conventional solutions. And this is where his concept of Black nationalism comes into sharper focus. What did he mean by Black nationalism, and why was it so controversial?
For Malcolm X, Black nationalism was about empowerment. He believed that Black people needed to build their own institutions and businesses separate from white society to achieve true economic and political power. He saw it as a way of reclaiming agency and self-determination after centuries of oppression.
It was about creating a space where Black people could define their own destiny, right?
Exactly. It was about fostering a sense of pride in Black identity and culture. And this message resonated deeply with many Black people who were tired of the slow pace of progress and the continued violence and discrimination they face.
But his break with the Nation of Islam and his embrace of Black nationalism also put him in a very dangerous position.
He faced constant threats, both from white supremacists who saw him as a dangerous radical, and from some within the Nation of Islam who viewed him as a traitor. He lived with the knowledge that his outspokenness had made him a target.
It's chilling to read his words about the possibility of being assassinated.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the climate of fear and violence that surrounded the fight for racial justice in America at the time. But despite these threats, he never backed down from speaking truth to power.
His courage was unwavering. He continued to travel, speak, and organize, inspiring people with his message of Black empowerment and self-determination.
And he was a captivating speaker. He could command a room with his wit, intelligence, and a passionate delivery.
He was a master orator, able to connect with people from all walks of life. He could speak the language of the streets and the language of academia with equal fluency.
Yeah, there's that anecdote about a Harlem hustler who approached him after a rally, praising his all-original scene at the racetrack and then using slang to describe how he planned to rob someone.
Wow.
It's a humorous story, but it also highlights Malcolm X's ability to connect with people on their own terms, regardless of their background. He didn't shy away from the realities of life in the ghetto. He embraced them.
He saw both the pain and the potential within those communities. He understood the anger and frustration that had been building for generations, and he warned about the potential for violence if those feelings weren't addressed.
He spoke about the long, hot summer of 1964, with riots erupting in cities across America, as a sign of what could happen if Black people's grievances continued to be ignored.
He saw those riots not just as isolated incidents, but as symptoms of a much deeper problem, a problem that went to the very core of American society.
So while he was building this new movement and facing these external threats, he was also going through a period of deep personal and spiritual reflection.
He never stopped learning, never stopped questioning, never stopped evolving. He was constantly reading, studying, and engaging in conversations with people from all walks of life, seeking to deepen his understanding of Islam and the world around him.
He had those conversations with Orthodox Muslims who encouraged him to expand his knowledge of Islam beyond the teachings of the Nation of Islam. He even met with Dr. Mahmoud Youssef Shawarbi, a prominent Muslim scholar who challenged some of his assumptions about Islam.
These encounters planted seeds of doubt in his mind. He began to question some of the doctrines of the Nation of Islam, particularly those that seemed to contradict the broader principles of Islam.
And this questioning ultimately led him to embark on a second pilgrimage, this time with the intention of deepening his understanding of true Islam.
This journey took him to Mecca, but also to other parts of the Muslim world, including Egypt, where he met with Prince Faisal, who would later become King of Saudi Arabia.
And it's fascinating that Prince Faisal also expressed concern about the Nation of Islam's teachings, telling Malcolm X that the Black Muslims have the wrong Islam. He encouraged him to study the Quran and other Islamic texts in their original Arabic.
These conversations, along with his own studies, confirmed Malcolm X's growing realization that the Nation of Islam's version of Islam was distorted and incomplete.
Right.
He began to embrace a more universalist vision of Islam, one that transcended race and nationality.
He talked about experiencing true brotherhood with Muslims of all races and nationalities during his travels, a stark contrast to the racial segregation and animosity he had experienced in America.
It was a powerful affirmation of his evolving understanding of Islam. He saw that Islam had the potential to unite people across racial and cultural divides, a message that directly challenged the racial divisions that plagued American society.
And this shift in his understanding of Islam also impacted his views on race.
He began to acknowledge that not all white people were racist and that the fight for racial justice was not about demonizing individuals, but about dismantling the system of racism.
This marked a significant evolution from his earlier views, which had emphasized the inherent evil of the white man.
It's a testament to his intellectual honesty and his willingness to revise his beliefs based on new experiences and knowledge. His thinking about race became more nuanced and sophisticated as he recognized the complexities of the issue.
This evolution is also reflected in his language. He started using the term Afro-American instead of Negro, recognizing the importance of reclaiming a sense of African heritage and identity.
And he talked about the need for unity and solidarity among people of African descent worldwide, connecting the struggle for Black liberation in America to the global fight against colonialism and imperialism.
He was starting to see the bigger picture, connecting the dots between race, religion, and global politics.
His worldview expanded to encompass a global perspective on oppression and liberation. This broader understanding informed his vision for a new kind of Black activism, one grounded in self-reliance, economic empowerment, and a more nuanced understanding of race and religion.
But despite this evolution, he remained critical of American society and its treatment of Black people.
Absolutely. He saw firsthand the legacy of colonialism and the exploitation of African resources by Western powers during his travels to Africa. He was particularly critical of the United States' role in propping up racist regimes in Africa, like the apartheid government in South Africa.
And he was outspoken in his condemnation of American imperialism, connecting it to the ongoing struggle for Black liberation. It was during this trip to Africa that he also began to articulate more clearly his critique of the civil rights movement's focus on integration.
He argued that integration was a trap, a way of assimilating Black people into a system designed to oppress them.
Right, he believed that true liberation required Black people to build their own power base economically and politically.
This led him to advocate more forcefully for Black nationalism. He saw it as a way for Black people to reclaim their dignity, heritage, and right to self-determination.
It was about building a sense of community and solidarity separate from the white-dominated power structures that had kept Black people marginalized for centuries.
His advocacy for Black nationalism, however, drew criticism from various quarters. White people often viewed it as separatist and hateful, while some Black people believed that integration was the only path to equality.
He was accused of being a racist, a demagogue, a threat to the stability of American society. But he refused to be silenced, believing that Black people had the right to defend themselves by any means necessary against the violence and oppression they faced.
His message resonated with many Black people who are frustrated by the slow pace of change and the continued brutality of the white power structure.
Yeah.
He became a symbol of Black resistance, a voice for the voiceless, a leader willing to challenge the status quo and fight for true liberation.
But his uncompromising stance also made him a target. The threats to his life intensified, and he knew his time was running out. He even predicted that the white press would try to paint him as a figure of hate and violence after his death.
And tragically, that prediction proved to be true.
Right.
Despite the attempts to demonize him, his legacy continues to inspire people around the world who are fighting for social justice and equality. His story reminds us that real change requires courage, conviction, and a willingness to challenge the systems of power that perpetuate oppression.
It's incredible how he managed to accomplish so much in such a short lifetime. His life was tragically cut short at the age of 39.
Right.
What were those final months like for him?
You know, his final days were marked by this heightened sense of urgency and a growing awareness of the dangers he faced. He was receiving death threats, his home had been firebombed,
Wow.
and he knew that his outspokenness had made him a target.
He was living under immense pressure,
Yeah.
yet he never wavered in his commitment to his beliefs. There's this quote where he says, "If I die, it will be as a martyr for the cause of brotherhood." It shows how deeply he believed in his mission.
Despite the threats, he continued to travel and speak, urging Black people to fight for their rights and stand up against oppression. He spoke about the need for self-defense, arguing that Black people had the right to protect themselves against violence. This message, by any means necessary, became one of his most famous and controversial pronouncements.
Yeah, it was a message that resonated with many who felt that the nonviolent approach of the civil rights movement wasn't enough to address the systemic violence and oppression they faced.
He was becoming increasingly critical of the integrationist approach, arguing that it was a form of assimilation that ultimately benefited white society more than black people.
Right.
He believed that true liberation required a more radical transformation of society.
So as he was grappling with these ideas and navigating this dangerous landscape, what ultimately led to his assassination?
On February 21st, 1965, Malcolm X was scheduled to speak at the Audubon Ballroom in Harlem. As he began his address, chaos erupted. Several men rushed the stage and shot him multiple times at close range.
It's a moment that is seared into the collective memory of the black community, a tragic reminder of the violence that often silences those who dare to challenge the status quo.
3 members of the Nation of Islam were later convicted of the murder, but there has been much speculation and debate about the role of other parties, including government agencies. The full truth behind his assassination may never be known, but it remains a symbol of the price often paid for speaking truth to power.
It's heartbreaking that his voice was silenced at such a pivotal moment in history. What impact did his death have on the Black Power movement and the struggle for civil rights?
His assassination sent shockwaves through the black community and beyond. It was a devastating loss for the Black Power movement, which was gaining momentum at the time.
It seemed like a major setback for the movement.
Yeah.
Did his ideas continue to influence activists and thinkers after his death?
Absolutely. While some may have disagreed with his tactics or rhetoric, there's no denying the profound impact he had on the Black Power movement. His emphasis on black pride, self-determination, and economic empowerment resonated deeply with a generation of activists who were growing disillusioned with the slow pace of progress and the limitations of integration.
He inspired people to think differently about what it meant to be black in America, and to imagine a future where black people could control their own destiny. His legacy is complex and multifaceted. He was a controversial figure in his own time, and his views continue to be debated and discussed today.
But one thing is certain: he was a powerful voice for change, a brilliant thinker, and a fearless advocate for justice. He challenged us to confront the uncomfortable truths about race and power in America. He inspired generations of activists to continue the fight for equality.
His story is a reminder that real change doesn't come easily.
No, it doesn't.
It requires courage, conviction, and a willingness to challenge the status quo, even when it's dangerous to do so.
And it also reminds us that we should never stop learning, growing, and evolving in our understanding of the world around us. Malcolm X was a man in constant pursuit of truth and justice, and his life's journey, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire and challenge us to this day.
That was quite a journey. Malcolm X's life was full of dramatic twists and turns reflecting the changing social landscape of America in the 20th century. His evolving views on race, religion, and the fight for black liberation continue to spark debate and inspire action today. What aspect of Malcolm X's story resonated with you the most? And how can his legacy inform our understanding of race relations in the world today? That's something to reflect on as we conclude our deep dive into the life and legacy of Malcolm X.
And this is what I had to become aware of on my pilgrimage to Mecca. I could see then that there are many white people in this country who will side with the Negro in whatever he has to do to protect himself.
But that's a considerable change of opinion in Malcolm X.
No, today I'm speaking for myself. Formerly I spoke for Elijah Muhammad. And everything I said was, Elijah Muhammad teaches us thus and so. I'm speaking now from what I think, from what I have seen, from what I have analyzed, and the conclusions that I have reached.
Then the white man is no longer the devil, and he is no longer bound to be evil?
If I judge a man by his conscious behavior, I am not a racist. I don't subscribe to any of the tenets of racism.
Then there are good whites and good blacks and bad whites and blacks.
It's not a case of being good and bad, good or bad blacks and whites. It's a case of being good or bad human beings.